My name is Rohini Aurora. I am the MLA for Burnaby East and the chair of the Select Standing Committee on Children and Youth. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting today on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. Before we begin, I would also like to welcome our new members, MLA Darlene Rochford, MLA Deborah Toporowski, MLA Rosalind Bird, MLA Christina Lowen, and MLA Dallas Brody. We're looking forward to working with you all. This morning, we will be considering the Office of the Representative for Children and Youth's most recent annual report and service plan. As a reminder, this committee's terms of reference specify that it receive and review these two reports each year. I would now like to welcome the Representative for Children and Youth, Dr. Jennifer Charlesworth, and the Executive Director, Blair Mitchell, to the meeting and turn it over to them for the presentation. Please note, we have allocated approximately 25 minutes for your presentation, followed by questions from members. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And lovely to be in a circle with all of you and look forward to getting to know you in the months to come. I just wanted to check to see whether you have received or have the slides. So I will refer to those and as we're moving from slide to slide. So as a way of beginning in slide 2, talking about grounded in place, purpose, and relationship, you may not know, but our main office is just down the way. You can almost see it from here. We're on Wharf Street. And we are so fortunate to be able to meet with you here, as well as do our business in our Victoria office on the lands of the Lekwungen people and the Kosapsan and Songhees nations. We also have an office in what is known as Prince George and the Lheidli territory. But of course, our staff are spread throughout the province, and we work in all regions and with all communities across BC. So today I'm joined by my colleague Blair Mitchell. Blair is the Executive Director of Individual Advocacy, First Nations, Métis and Inuit Engagement, and one of the most experienced and long-standing members of the RCY team, with 13 years with RCY in addition to extensive experience in community-based social work. So we will do our best to answer your questions today. There are obviously some familiar faces, but unfamiliar ones as well. So I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. I have been the representative for children and youth in BC since 2018, and I'm currently midway through my second 5-year term in this role, which has been the most incredible honor and humbling honor and privilege of my 48-year career in child youth serving systems, ranging from government and nonprofit work to academia and consulting. And in virtually every service line, with the exception of youth justice, but fortunately Blair has done youth justice work and several other folks have, so we're well supported in covering all those service lines. As we often say in our work, this demographic is currently 20% of our population, but 100% of our future. Young people will be our future leaders, our economic and social engines, decision makers, carers, and leaders in many different ways and fields. So doing all that we can right now to support them to thrive, not just survive, is crucial for now, obviously, and for the generations to come. Today we're here to talk through our annual report for 2024-25 and our service plan for the next 3 years, as is required by the statute that guides our work, the Representative for Children and Youth Act. You'll see after reading the report that it's not just performative, but rather this past year, it's a critical foundation, it's established a critical foundation pillar for our work, and it sets a new and unique direction, not just for our office, but for the whole child serving system. So moving on to slide 3. 24-25 was one of the most defining in our office's history. It was a year of heartbreak, reflection, and reorientation. And it began, as you know, with the release of our most extensive systemic review to date, entitled Don't Look Away. That report and the courage of those who participated in it changed how we see our work. It's not enough to respond to crises. We must understand how systems themselves can perpetuate them, and we must rebuild from that understanding. When you look at the cover of our annual report, you'll see a young boy reaching for the sky, a night sky full of brilliance and possibility. In my message in the preface to the report, you'll see what this image means to us. It symbolizes a pivotal transformation in how we think and act for young people in this province. So today, as I share the annual report with you, I'll be speaking not just about numbers or outputs, but about direction and outcomes, and how we are orienting our work to what we now call our North Star, a vision of child well-being rooted in safety, belonging, identity, love, and opportunity. Our North Star emerged from thousands of voices. Nearly 2,000 people participated in the work on Don't Look Away: youth, families, elders, matriarchs, nations, frontline workers, researchers, academics, and community leaders. They told us in precise and painful detail that children don't fall through cracks. They fall through gaps we've allowed to exist between ministries, between mandates, and between levels of government. The North Star reframes what success should mean for child and youth serving systems in this province, and it says that our work isn't done when a child is merely safe from harm. It's done when they're safe and connected, seen and supported to thrive. This is a profound shift from protection to well-being, from reacting to harm to preventing it, by ensuring children's needs for identity, love, and stability are met within the context of their family and community. You can see why this annual report and service plan is so important to us. It's not just a report, but rather a roadmap that defines this new direction and charts a course on how we're going to get there in collaboration with many, many others. It's the compass guiding everything you'll hear about today, our advocacy, our investigations, our monitoring, and our future goals. So moving to slide 4, RCYBC, who we are. As most of you know, and we'll be doing more of an orientation a little bit later, we've been providing oversight for child and youth serving systems in BC for 18 years. Our office was created following the Honourable Ted Hughes review and established unanimously in statute by the Legislature in 2007. The rep is appointed by the Legislative Assembly as an independent officer and serves an oversight function for designated and reviewable child, youth, and young adult services that are delivered by government. Moving to slide 5. The Representative for Children and Youth Act outlines our 3 statutory functions, which are providing individual advocacy to young people and their circles of support, reviewing and investigating injuries and deaths that young people experience or sustain while receiving government services. And finally, the third piece of our mandate is monitoring the performance of systems of support and care that young people receive in the province, as well as monitoring the implementation of the recommendations we make to improve and strengthen those systems of support and care. We do this through a rights-based lens, grounded in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And increasingly, we do it in partnerships with self-determining nations who are reclaiming jurisdiction and rebuilding their own child and family services in accordance with their laws and teachings. Moving to slide 6. As important as what we do is how we do it, because we deal with highly sensitive situations where children, youth, and young adults are extremely vulnerable. So we have to hold ourselves to high ethical and evidentiary standards. To ensure we're giving you, as legislators and the government, the best information and advice possible to inform decisions, we take our methodology very seriously. And we embrace what's called a two-eyed seeing approach, bringing the very best of Western and Indigenous approaches together. And we ensure that those closest to the issues and concerns, the young people themselves, their families, caregivers, service providers, leaders in the community, are engaged in and inform our work. And we also look to other academics, academic literature and jurisdictions to inform our work. So essentially getting the lived experience, the other jurisdictions, the literature, Indigenous perspectives, Western perspectives, and pull that all together in various ways in order to inform our work. Our work is both technical and deeply human. It's data and heart, and we often say that our work is heart work because it requires empathy, humility, and the courage to face painful truths. And at times we make mistakes, and we have to own that as well and restore relationships, restore understanding. So I want to bring these functions alive for you with some examples of the difference this work has made, what we've done, and the difference this work has made this last year. So moving to advocacy. We often refer to advocacy as the heartbeat of our organization. It's our front face. The support we provide to young people and adults who support them is absolutely critical. And advocacy is where we meet young people most directly, and it's where the human impact of system failures become impossible to ignore. So moving to slide 8, by the numbers. In 24-25, our office received 2,003 requests for advocacy, opening 1,385 new case files representing 1,862 young people. So to put that into perspective, it's a 28% increase over last year and a 51% increase since 21-22. The complexity of these cases continues to grow, and more than a quarter now remain open for 9 months or longer. And I should also say that with all those requests for advocacy, there's something that is done, but we may not open a case file, and we can talk some more about that during the orientation, but we are always providing something to the caller. But for those that require more intensive work on from our advocates, we open a case file and track that. Moving to slide 9, to give you a sense, 68% of our advocacy work involved the Ministry of Children and Family Development, 13% involved Indigenous Child and Family Services agencies, 4% involved Community Living BC, and a growing number now relate to health authorities, particularly around mental health and substance use. But beyond the numbers are the stories. So moving to slide 10. These stories are shared in the annual report, but to give you a thumbnail sketch, Maya, 15, and her siblings were separated while they were in care. We intervened to reunite them because sibling connection is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. Haruto, a teen with autism and mental health concerns, and his family were told to wait until his situation reached crisis before he could access support. We challenged that logic that a child must first break to be helped, and he received early intervention services for his mental health and supports for autism. Jaylene was about to age out of care. She was unhoused and grieving the loss of her mother and her home. Our advocate found her and worked to rebuild trust, showing her that support doesn't have to end at 19. Fatima and Mina, sisters that were placed with their aunt, whose story you'll see in this report and that we often refer to when we think of kinship care, illustrates what happens when kinship families step up, but the system doesn't step up with them. So the advocates in that situation supported Fatima and Mina and her auntie to make sure that they got the supports that would stabilize and sustain that living arrangement. These stories are not exceptions, they're patterns. Each one shows us what needs to change structurally, not just individually. Advocacy at its best is both frontline and systemic, and it's how we learn where the system is working well, and where it's breaking. So moving to slide 11, reviews and investigations. Our reviews and investigations work is also an essential and humbling part of our mandate. It's a place where the system's failures and fragilities show up in their starkest form. So we receive reports of deaths and injuries of children and youth between birth and their 19th birthday, where they are or were in care or receiving services within 1 year of their injury or death. And every report we receive represents a moment when a young person's well-being was seriously compromised and sometimes fatally, while they were connected to government systems that were supposed to keep them safe and supported. Moving to slide 12, by the numbers. This past year, our office received 6,905 reports of critical injuries and deaths, of injuries and deaths, an average of nearly 575 each month. And of these, a little over 3,100 were critical injuries. And what that means is they met a threshold of life-altering injuries, so very serious things like sexual violence, exploitation, suicidality, self-harming, loss of a parent due to the toxic drug crisis. So these critical injuries are the ones that we do a deeper dive with. There were also 115 deaths, all of which get reviewed. This represents a 69% increase in reported injuries since 21-22, and that steep rise reflects two things: the growing complexity of children's lives and the situations that they're facing, as well as, the good news, a culture of greater transparency in reporting. So it's both an increase in the presence and volume of harm, but it's also more people are taking to heart the reporting. Regardless, it's a signal that too many children remain in distress. Our goal in our reviews and investigations work is not to assign individual blame, but to understand why harm occurs in the first place, where safeguards break down, and how we can prevent future tragedies. It's about learning from harm, not just recording it. The numbers tell a story, but they are not the whole story. 63% of all reports involve Indigenous children and youth, and that figure alone reveals the ongoing legacy of colonization, systemic racism, and the inequities that remain deeply embedded in our public systems. Moving to slide 13. We continue to see the same painful patterns repeat: intergenerational trauma unaddressed, culturally safe services underdeveloped, and accountability diffused across bureaucratic boundaries. The leading causes of reported injuries, for your information, were emotional harm, suicidality, and substance-related harm. So to break that down a little bit, emotional harm, it primarily refers to two things. One is harms that are experienced by children and youth when they are in the care of the state, so in foster care or group care, so often at the hands of their caregivers. And it also includes children who have lost important people in their life, the trauma associated with toxic drug poisoning. So they've lost parents, siblings, or their caregivers, so the people most close to them. So that's what that category is, and it's definitely our largest. And then suicidality and self-harm is significant, and then direct substance-related harm, so young people who are experiencing toxic drug poisonings and maybe survive, but with harms like brain injuries or those that lose their lives. With respect to the toxic drug crisis, I just want to take a moment there. As I said, there's a deeper story beyond the deaths. Of course, we hear a lot about the deaths, but there's a deeper story because there are literally thousands of young people that are experiencing drug poisonings. Themselves, they are surviving, but they often have trauma or brain injuries as a consequence of that. And children are going through the profound experience of loss of the people that are important to them. So we need to understand that, because that gives rise to instability, perhaps more government intervention, protection, involvement, etc. So we, through the toxic drug work that we've been doing, that I'll speak to a wee bit, is we understand how important it is to appreciate and work on the intersections between public health, mental health, community safety, child well-being, education, etc. So these systems are inextricably linked, and when one fails, they all do, because it's so interdependent in the life of a child. With respect to suicide, we found that 15% of young people who died by suicide were missing from placements and their foster or group homes at the time of their deaths. So again, something for us to understand and address. Many were waiting for mental health or substance use services that never materialized or had been disconnected from the very systems responsible for their care. And these are not anomalies, they're symptoms of a system that's still too reactive, too fragmented, and too slow to act when a child is in crisis. Every one of those 6,905 reports represents more than data. It represents a child's life disrupted, a family's heartbreak, and a collective responsibility. Moving to slide 14. When we look at the totality of cases, the message is clear. Our systems remain overly focused on procedural compliance rather than relational connection. The safety net for children is stretched too thin in every direction, and the inequities that drive harm, such as poverty, racism, stigma, and disconnection, must be confronted, not just managed. Our reviews and investigations mandate, just making sure I'm on time, includes being able to conduct investigations, which are robust undertakings with witnesses under oath, with access to police records, healthcare records, child welfare records, etc. So one of the stories that we did was Don't Look Away, and I want to, as we move into this, introduce you to Colby, because I think it's important that we bring children into the room and we understand who we are speaking about and on behalf of. So Colby, for those of you who maybe have not read the report, I do have one copy, and we're happy to get you a copy if you wish, a hard copy. But Colby was a little 11-year-old boy who died after experiencing torture at the hand of his extended family caregiver. But what's important to know is that he was a very sweet, people described him as a very sweet boy who was full of love and heart. His smile was wide and contagious, and he had a gentle way about him. There are stories about how he was as a big brother to his little sister and how he protected her and supported her when they were going through really difficult times as a family. Meeting Colby, you understand that you have to meet the family as well. This was a family that had tremendous love, but and tried very hard to stay whole, but for a whole variety of reasons within our system, they didn't get the help they needed. So it was a classic example of intergenerational trauma and systems missed opportunities. And what's important about understanding Colby's story and Don't Look Away is that his death was entirely preventable. And when we take a look at what we need to do and what we're being called in to do, future deaths are entirely predictable if we don't take action. So Don't Look Away is one of the most significant, so I've moved to slide 15, what Colby's story taught us. Don't Look Away is one of the most significant and painful systemic reviews our office has ever undertaken. It began as an investigation in Colby's death, but it quickly became something larger and a mirror held up to the entire child welfare system in this province. We worked with involved nations, the First Nations Leadership Council, and the Our Children Our Way Society, and many others. And together we heard from almost 2,000 people that included family members, elders, social workers, community leaders, etc. What they told us was hard to hear, but we listened. They told us that too often our child welfare system responds only when things go wrong, instead of investing early to help families stay together and thrive. They told us that despite decades of reports and promises, I have stacks of them in my office, our systems remain siloed, under-resourced, and deeply reactive. And they told us that children's safety can't be separated from their connections to culture, community, and identity, to school, to important relationships. And when those are lost, everything else starts to unravel. They also reminded us that although Colby was a First Nations child and there are disproportionate harms experienced by Indigenous children, these are not Indigenous problems, but systemic ones that when addressed will enable all children to experience that safety, nurturance, and belonging. Don't Look Away made recommendations aimed at transforming the child welfare system into one that is relational, restorative, and rooted in well-being. So going to slide 16, please, or slide 15, please. I think we're on, yeah. One of the things that we learned was that we have to reimagine the child welfare system towards one of care and connection and well-being. We also learned through that work that we have to invest in our workforce and the leadership needed to sustain that transformation, and I'll come back to that in a moment. We also learned how important it was to support Indigenous self-determination and jurisdiction as nations recover their systems of care for children. We also saw very clearly the intersection between child welfare, disability, mental health, substance use, and poverty, and housing precarity, and that more focused and collaborative approach needs to be taken. And finally, we saw that we have to bring more accountability and transparency into our work going forward. We also, as we were doing this work, going to slide 16, we made a number of recommendations, and we said it was critically important that we took a whole of government and a whole systems approach. So it's not just Ministry of Children and Family Development. It has to be education, justice, Attorney General, public safety, education, mental health, health. All of those systems, social development, poverty reduction, have to be working together, and that's been the profound call to action. There were 5 collective responsibilities that we identified that calls us all in to try and address violence, family support, kinship care, etc. And there were 45 recommendations and 44 actions to transform from child welfare to a child well-being system. Moving to slide 17, please.
Just
One
to
of-
jump in here, Dr. Charlesworth, I just want to mention, we just have 1.5 minutes at this point to get through the report.
We do.
And
Okay.
I just want to ensure we have enough time for members to ask questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move along to, if you move to slide 19, which speaks to recommendations. And I'll just speak very quickly there, apologies for my absence on the time, that one of the things we do is our third mandate pertains to monitoring. And what we do there is we pay attention to recommendations that we've made and the kinds of things that are being done, as well as how the system overall is doing. So there are areas in which we're seeing some significant progress, and there are areas that continue to lag. So our work is to try and assist government to move forward on those areas where there's lags and to continue to sustain the work that they're doing that is making a difference. The other thing that I should say is that I want to hold my hands up to government. They did accept all the recommendations. So moving to slide 21, where we see progress, is all the recommendations for Don't Look Away were accepted. The no time to wait reports that were pertaining to workforce have also been actioned. There are many activities there. And the third report related to this area was around too many left behind and services for children with disabilities. And I am hopeful that the work that's underway will prove to be very beneficial for families of children and youth with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Okay.
Charlesworth. I just want to open up the floor to folks. Is there anyone that would like to begin with asking some questions? Amelia, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charlesworth, and thank you, Blair, for being here. Since you just touched on recommendations, I'm wondering if you can give a quick overview and refresher, maybe point to where in the report. I'm hoping that there's a mirror recommendation slide to the way that it was done last year. So there were 72 recommendations and it was tracked by extent of progress. I know that there was a discussion about changing the way recommendations were tracked, and can you just refresh my memory? Did that change? Did that actually change? And if so, is there a way to do an apples to apples comparison on the old 72 recommendations progress to the recommendations progress in this current report? I'm sorry, that's a lengthy question, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
I do, thank
Yeah.
you. So let me know if I don't answer your question in the way that you need it answered. So your first part, is there a way of comparing apples and apples between 23-24 and 24-25? No. We could certainly gather information because we ask for government to provide us updates on all of the recommendations. But the reason it's not apples to apples is that, as you say, as you recall, we said we were going to change the approach that we were taking around recommendations because there are sort of different levels of recommendations. Some are very easy to implement. You know, you change a program, you add a policy, you do training. Others require much more time, effort, and energy and resources. So if you take a recommendation, for example, that's like offer training, you can tick that one off very quickly. But others that require much more investment over time, it will show as just some progress or moderate progress for a very long period of time. So what we were trying to do was to better understand those different kinds of recommendations and have a better way of providing more useful feedback to you about actual progress. And then the other part of that is that we were dependent up till now on what the ministry tells us that they've done. What we wanted to know is, what's the experience of the family members? What's the experience of the young person? So what's the outcomes of it? So that's what we're working on right now. Is to try and find a better way of triangulating, if you will, between people's experience, what's said to be done, and then what's actually happening. So that's still underway. The other thing that's significant is that in Don't Look Away, we said we appreciated that we had hundreds of recommendations outstanding, but we felt that where we wanted government to put their attention was on Don't Look Away and the recommendations there, because we felt that virtually anything that we've said before can kind of stack underneath those. So what we've said is we would review all of the outstanding recommendations and make a determination as to those that we were going to monitor but not report out on, and then focus our attention much more on Don't Look Away. So that's been done with the ministry, is basically saying, these are the recommendations that we're going to continue to keep an eye on, but we're not going to be pushing you to the same extent and publicly reporting, because we want you to focus way more over here on the Don't Look Away. So hopefully that answers your question. So it's basically two parts to summarize. One is we needed to figure out how to evaluate them better. And secondly, we need to keep the focus on Don't Look Away. So we've kind of stacking things underneath that as opposed to reporting apples to apples. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. It does help. I will just make a comment and then cap it off with a question, because we could talk about just this one thing for a long time. But the comment that I would like to make, and this sort of applies just generally to reports from the RCY, is that for me, I struggle sometimes to understand KPIs and data, because there seems to be, from report to report, different defined terms. Some things are tracked subjectively, some are tracked objectively. And when I look at other jurisdictions and their, mirror reports, they seem to have much clearer data. And I don't want to denigrate at all from the amazing contextual and storytelling, and I think that's very important, and that is so well done in all the RCY reports. But one piece of feedback I would like to provide sort of in general to save time is that it's very difficult to track outcomes, because it seems like the goalposts are moving all the time. So for me, looking back I was very focused, as you will remember, on the 72 last year. And now in reading where we're at with the recommendations today, it's very difficult for me to contrast that. So I would just really love if there was a way to have more data-driven KPI information in the reports generally, and then to also kind of standardize defined terms. Sometimes in mandate or out of mandate injuries, sometimes they have deaths, sometimes they don't, if you know what I mean. So if there was a way of keeping things standard, so that's my comment. And then my question is, can you tell me in this report, on what page would I find the best place to look at this year's recommendations, where they're at, if you have a page reference?
52 and 53 is where we show where progress is stalled or where it's lagging, and those refer to specific reports. And then, so that gives you a sense of where things are that we are concerned and we're monitoring. So happy to speak to any of those. The other thing is on page 51. So you'll see 50 and 51 speaks to the monitoring progress towards the North Star, so towards Don't Look Away. And it also speaks to how some of the prior recommendations are sort of situated within it. But I just want to say, I appreciate what you're saying. We are kind of in that transitional space of trying to figure out, how do you measure success and outcomes? And we've called upon government to start measuring outcomes, not just inputs, throughputs, and outputs. So we're also having to figure out, how do you measure actual outcomes, not just things like that can be ticked off. It's like, oh, training was done. The important thing is, if training was done, did it change behavior? Did it actually improve the practice? So we're trying to get underneath that. But I do have a question for you, if you don't mind, because we want to be helpful as we move forward. When you speak about the KPIs, the key performance indicators, are you speaking about the KPIs for us as the office, how we measure our impact, or the KPIs for the recommendations that we make, or both?
I would say that I'm speaking more to the KPIs for the recommendations that you make. In terms of performance of, your office, that's not what I'm referring to really at all, because it's always so great. I'm thinking more about, critical injuries, deaths, the really hard data pieces that are easier to quantify. It's just much more objective to track how things are going with pieces of data like that. So that's more so what I'm thinking of.
Okay, that's very helpful, so thank you for that. And just to give you a sense, because this might be of interest, and again, I'm always happy to meet with any members or come back to the whole committee, but we now have what we call a patterns and trends committee?
Yeah.
Working group?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that, that has brought together the various teams to take a look at the data on a quarterly basis and to drill down on the data. So we have pages and pages and pages of quantitative as well as qualitative data. So happy to share that, and it's good advice that maybe we need to be more transparent in the report. So I appreciate that.
Very much.
Thank you. Rosalind, please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Charlesworth. Thank you, Mitchell, for joining us today. Very appreciative of the information that you've shared. I have a follow-up question actually from Amelia's. You mentioned that you had sort of changed in regards to tracking recommendations. You went back to the ministry and said, well, we want to know how this is actually impacting families. So, you've made this recommendation, you're working on this, but we want to see it quantitative in regards to, is what you're saying happening actually resulting in what families are reporting back to us? Are you actually using different metrics than the ministry is?
Yes. So, well, let me clarify. Metrics as in, are we relying on the ministry's metrics or are we creating our own metrics?
Well, I'm curious why there might be a disparity there, because I'm not quite sure how, and I'm new to this committee, so I don't know if I ask a question that's a critic question and not a committee question. I haven't quite balanced those two yet, so please give me some grace here. I'm trying to figure out how the ministry and this committee can have a better understanding of whether the ministry is actually moving towards its targets if it's using different metrics than you are.
Oh, I
and
see.
They don't find out that they're not moving until you write a report, because
Right, I get you.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, so let me see if I can help on this one. So there's different bodies of information, right? There's the data, there's the, caseloads and things like that. There's also the experience of families. So to give let's just take disability. So Too Many Left Behind was one of, many reports that we've written on disability. What we looked at there was what the ministries provided us, and then we also did our own analysis based on the research and evidence of prevalence, for example, and then we also surveyed families. So sometimes we generate our own data by reaching out to families to understand what their experience is, that then lets us take a look at what the ministry is doing and provide them with feedback. So if the ministry is saying, well, we have all of these programs, but now we hear from families, well, we can't access those programs. We aren't able to get respite even when we qualify for respite. Then that's a way of us being accountable, not just to what is told to us, but what we learn from families. So in that way, we are using different metrics. But the other point that I think is in the question is, do we wait until the end of our work to provide feedback to the ministry? No. So we provide feedback there are many, many times that we're working with the ministry and nothing will show up in a report because it's about our day-to-day work. So whether it's around advocacy or reviews and investigations, for example, we might do a comprehensive review. That's not going to be publicly released. It's not required to be publicly released by the statute, but we want the ministry to know what we've learned so that they can make changes right now, rather than going through an investigation. So we try and give the ministry feedback in real time as we go along. Does that help?
Yep, that's helpful.
And I just wanted to add myself to the list quickly. I thought it might be helpful just to go over, in the last report, I remember that we were talking about some of the ministries that were touched by the RCY's work. And it's not just MCFD. So I think that and the conversation around jurisdiction under DRIPA as well, I think also, from my understanding, shifted some of the way that the approach was taken. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for thinking about the experience of families and the children, because if they don't have faith in the system, or if they are uncomfortable, they are likely not to ask for help in the first place. And so I did catch when you were talking about the difference in the willingness to report, and also the increase in transparency that's allowing more and more families to come forward and share their stories. And I think that's that's also, in my mind, a key performance indicator.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you raising that this is much more than MCFD, and I think that's what we learned through Don't Look Away, was that we identified dozens and dozens of missed opportunities when, from the point at which Colby was born, for example, that there wasn't anybody that said, do you have the money to purchase the specialized formula that your fragile little baby is going to need? To have you got safe housing? We're noticing that there have been numerous police reports. What's happening in your family around violence? So when we start to think about all of those ways in which a family that was trying to stay together was not able to stay together, then we have to take a look at the role of the healthcare system, the role of the justice system, the role of the police, the role of education, the role of community supports, et cetera. So that's a big shift, is that MCFD, as one of our circle of advisors said, is like we wait until things break and we expect the ministry to fix things when they don't have the tools in their toolkit. They don't have housing or income security or food security in their toolkit to be able to deal with things. So widening the circle around kids is a big ask, because we're all used to our mandates and our silos. But it's a worthy endeavor, and quite frankly, I don't want to be one of those authors of a report or representative that looks back 10 years from now and says, I wish they'd done Don't Look Away, and I wish they'd implemented those recommendations, because our kids, I mean, clearly, if you've got almost 7,000, and in fact, we'll have over 7,000 this fiscal year if the rates continue, of children that are experiencing harms, surely we can do better.
Amelia, please go ahead.
Okay, and I'm not trying to monopolize, so please jump in if there's other questions. Thank you. I'd like to talk about some of the data around deaths. So we're seeing that actually a lot of the hard data looks like it's trending in the wrong direction. It seems like there's quite a large jump in critical injuries, reportable incidents. Almost every measurable KPI to me looks like it's trending in the wrong direction, but I'd like to talk about deaths. And specifically, something you'll recall I was quite focused on last year, and from the last report, was that 20 of the 103 deaths were labeled undetermined. So looking at this year's report on page 46, we have 31 undetermined deaths. And my question is that 31 cumulative to 20, or is that 31 as of today?
It's 31 in the fiscal year of 24-25.
But is it fresh for fiscal, or is it cumulative? In other words, is the 20 from the
Oh, I see what
last
you mean.
fiscal
I getcha.
outstanding, is what I'm trying to
No,
say.
it's not
What is the
additive.
total number of undetermined deaths to date?
That's a good question. If we start to stack up those that are still undetermined from previous years, I don't know that. We could certainly look at it, but these are These are the deaths that occurred in 24-25 that are undetermined. So you're quite right. There could be deaths from 23-24 that remain undetermined. And so that hopefully that answers your question. The other part of that question is why undetermined? Largely that's because of the coroner. Well, the coroner makes the determination of the cause of death. What we are finding is that there is considerable lag in the coroner from attending a death or to completing their review and providing us with the official determination of death. So that's basically a coroner delay, not an RCY, because we don't determine the cause of death. So we are awaiting information from the coroner.
If I could continue,
Yeah.
okay, that's very alarming to me because if I'm understanding you correctly, then we don't actually know right now what the status is of the 20 from the previous fiscal year. There are 31 in the current fiscal year. So let's just say hypothetically, it could be a total of 51 undetermined. This is,
So,
It-
yes.
okay.
Yes, you're right, it could be. But I think there's a couple of things that are important here. And we can certainly take a look and find out from the deaths from 23-24 and what remains undetermined. That's a great exercise for us. However, I think what's important is when we receive a reportable on a death, there's a considerable amount of information in that, and then we go back into the records and we kind of see what has transpired. Oftentimes, we have a very good idea of what has happened, and I'll give some examples of that, but the official notification of the cause of death has not happened. I'll give you, so some concrete examples is that we have seen, sadly, an increase in the number of infant deaths, and you'll see that in terms of the age distribution. So you see the under 1 is 27 children. A lot of those deaths are associated with what we call sleep-related injuries, situations in which children are extremely vulnerable in environments where there's substance use, etc. So the cause of death is not determined yet, but we have some pretty good indications of some of the things, the variables that were going on that likely contributed to that death or likely caused that death. So we don't stop and wait, if you will, for the determination. If we're starting to see some of those patterns, that's what will come to our patterns and trends. For example, what's happening with infant deaths and how many are experiencing situations in which it's unsafe sleeping and they've been smothered or they've been exposed to substances either in utero or following their birth, or they have significant. Most of those deaths, quite frankly, of the little ones is congenital disorders and things that were expected deaths, but of the undetermined ones, the little ones are typically those kinds of environmental causes.
Okay. If I may, I'll just continue.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this for those who are just joining the committee now. Last year, I extensively tried to get answers from many sources, and I'm not pointing the finger at yourselves because I appreciate what you've pointed out, which is that you're not the coroner. I did try to actually get information from the coroner, and the coroner pointed me to the ministry pointed me back to the coroner. And the reason this is so concerning is two things. Number one, the provincial average of undetermined deaths is around 4 to 7%, and we're looking at anywhere from 19% or over of percentage-wise of the deaths out of this ministry. So it's highly unusual. And the death of a child in any situation, but especially while receiving government services or in their care, should be the least mysterious and most transparent and highly reported and easily trackable thing ever. And when I look at places like Alberta, they do a couple of things. Number one, they break it down where they say if the case is pending. So when we say undetermined, We don't know whether that means, and when I say we, I mean from this report, it's not possible to tell whether that means the coroner finished and could not determine, or whether it is, as you say, these extensive delays at the coroner's office, which is a continuous systemic understaffing problem. So it's impossible to tell from that data. And when I look at Alberta, they have only a handful of undetermined deaths in a calendar year, and it doesn't carry over. So when I'm looking here at British Columbia, with the potentiality, as far as I can see from this data, of from these 2 fiscal years up to 51 undetermined deaths, it is so staggering. And quite frankly, I don't know who to go to next to figure out, because I keep getting pointed in other directions.
Hey, I really appreciate what you're saying, is that how many of those undetermined deaths are truly, we don't know, it's impossible to tell, or how many are still under investigation. My understanding is that most of them are still under investigation, because we're seeing delays of 3 years often times. So, but I would be happy to go back, because that's a very helpful distinction. I really agree with you there. And it's interesting to see what other jurisdictions, but happy to go back. We work very closely with the coroner and with the Child Death Review Unit. And they work really, really hard, and they're wonderful colleagues, but they are also struggling with staffing for sure. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and I'll go back, and then I'm happy to report back to the committee on that.
So we just have a few more minutes left, so we're going to take a question from MLA Rochford and then from MLA Lowen, and then we will wrap up.
Are you saying that there's up to a backlog of 3 years for reports being fully presented to you on a child's death in British Columbia?
From the coroner's office, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify on the sleep-related deaths. You were saying that a lot of them were environmental, there was substance use, but the kids are also in care. So just to clarify, they're in the care of the ministry, but they're working with the family most likely?
Thanks
Keeping the
for that.
child in the family? Because it wouldn't make any sense if they're in foster care or group care.
Yeah. So thanks for that clarification. So because our mandate includes kids in care and those receiving services, or where their family is receiving services, the vast majority are children that are in their family home. In fact, the vast majority of deaths, I can't remember the number, but it may be in here, but the vast majority of deaths are children within their family home. So in those cases, it would be the family is on the radar for Ministry of Children and Family Development. They might be getting family support. They might be getting, they might be under a supervision order. But they're receiving services, but the child is not in care. Yeah. Do you want to add something?
Well, just that's the overwhelming minority of situations, though. As you point out,
Yeah.
it's congenital, often complex, high medical needs. So
Yeah.
not to misrepresent the.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, the vast majority of children who are dying from what would be anticipated, especially our little ones. And the reason I raised the sleep-related deaths and whatnot is that those are preventable. So when we see those kinds of patterns, we think, well, what could we do to raise, and other jurisdictions have done some good work that we can learn from to try and raise awareness around sleep-related deaths and risks. And sometimes it's a poverty-related issue too, and that's preventable. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much for walking us through the report and answering these really important and pertinent questions. Is there any other business? MLA Boltby?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I would like to make a motion. I'll read the motion into the record and then I'll explain. I move that the Select Standing Committee on Children and Youth invite the representative for Children and Youth to its next scheduled meeting to continue its consideration of the annual report 2024-2025 and Service Plan 2025-2026 to 2027-2028. That's my motion. So I'd like to explain that not only is the trends are very concerning to me in this report, but in terms of what the committee has to go through, we have to go through all the reportable data, and then we have to go through the forward-looking service plan, and we have to go through the budget. So in terms of questions and discussion that, even I had for today, I have about 100 more questions, and I would anticipate that this committee probably needs about, not necessarily in one meeting, but at least 3 solid hours, I would suggest, to get through all of that. So for that reason, I would like to suggest that we move on to the last hour of this meeting and continue this discussion at another meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. The question is on the motion, all those voting. Are there any other speakers?
I was just going to second the motion. I don't know if that's official, but I totally agree
We'll
with
get
what
there.
Amelia just said. So, yeah.
MLA Toporowski?
Thank you, and thank you for the motion, because again, it's something, there's a lot to absorb in here. And being new here to this committee and having to go through all of this information and also just sitting and with my own trauma of my own work with this as well. So just feeling those two, and then looking at the numbers, like you're saying, how do you go through these numbers? You see a graph, and these are people. So that's the sad thing about it. These are children that have passed, and we're trying to work through making things better. And I'm happy to see that you have, you're meeting with First Nations councils and getting that input as well. But there is a lot to unravel and get through, so I will support that motion. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Okay, so the question is on the motion. All those voting in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion is carried. And then just before we wrap this portion up, I also wanted to I did hear back earlier during the question and answer. Would the committee like to request the status of the 2023-2024 undetermined debts from the RCY? Yeah. I don't think we need a motion on that, do we? Yeah. So you could provide that to us, that would be great. So Daryl will follow up then. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. That concludes our meeting today. I will seek a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Seconder? Awesome. This meeting is now adjourned.